How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Liberty Bowl. So, today I was having a little bit of a hypothetical, what if scenario type of conversation with Chat GPT, right? So, Chat GPT, as you know, is the open AI, basically, AI software that scours the internet and basically goes through and gives you answers based on predictive text, right? Based off of information that it gets from the internet. So this Chat GPT, it's notoriously been known for having a left wing bias, and we kind of went into a bit of some hypothetical scenarios, completely hypothetical. Something nothing like this could ever really happen in the world. But either way, we went in some extreme hypothetical scenarios, and yeah, Chat GPT seems to think that I just came up with the hypothetical scenario that would result in some sort of doomsday or like some sort of new world order, some sort of global collapse, right? But yeah, let's go ahead and check out this whole conversation that seems to point out the idea that the Democrats have lost their fucking minds, right? But before we get into that, as always, let's get into this. Alrighty, let's do this shit.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
We're losing our democracy!
More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
Wake up!
Before we get into that, let's get into this. Alrighty, so of course, hypothetically, right? I asked ChatGPT, what would happen if the federal government began a witch hunt on a former president and current frontrunner? Yeah, it's completely hypothetical. It's definitely outside the realms of reality. That would never ever happen, especially not in the United States, land of the free, home of the brave, right? The hypothetical scenario you describe is alarming and would have serious consequences for the United States and its political system. You don't say. Super left wing Chat GPT. Obviously, I'm sure you guys have seen some of the other videos that people have been doing with Chat GPT. They seem to have a left leaning bias. I mean, I've done a couple just different queries on different stuff. Some different kind of out there political philosophies and ideologies and stuff like that, and they tend to lean slightly to the left. All right, so let's see what type of shit would take place if such a hypothetical scenario were to happen. So, erosion of democratic norms. The use of government power to target a political opponent and former president would violate the principles of democracy. Right? There goes that hot button word again. That's how you know that ChatGPT is purely left wing, because we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic, even though we do, I guess, have a democratic style election system to represent to elect our representatives. We do not live in a democracy. However, we do have some democratic principles, right? So I guess that would be what they're talking about, would be a violation to the principles of democracy, right? Including the rule of law and due process. All right, so 2, polarization and division. Targeting a political opponent in this manner could further deepen political polarization and exacerbate division within the society, right? So that's essentially what we're coming to right now. I mean, as you guys know, I'm going to be uploading this Tuesday. So today, Trump is getting indicted. All right, Trump he's already flown to New York from Florida. He's he's there. They've already said that of course cameras are not going to be allowed inside the courtroom, because of course they know that this is going to be the result of it. It's going to further cause a deeper divide in political tensions here in America. I mean, Tim Pool says it all the time. It could result in civil war. Could result in even both sides kind of teaming up against government tyranny and government overreach and stuff like that, and basically seeing that some more moderate Democrats may even kind of realize that this is a pure political witch hunt, and this really does not make us look good, right? So 3, damage to the rule of law. The perception that government is using its power to target political opponents could undermine public trust in the rule of law and damage the legitimacy of government institutions. All right, so there's that word legitimacy, right? So that's the entire that's literally what government the job of government, other outside the realm of doing things like mediating, issues between individuals, foreign political affairs, things like that. That's one of the things that they do to keep themselves in power is legitimization, right? They need to basically legitimize themselves. They need to legitimize their different institutions and bureaucratic institutions and stuff like that, essentially. And basically they need to make the people think that there's no way to for society to operate without them, right? And that's essentially what they do. And that's what they're saying that this would do is it would completely damage the legitimacy of government institution. And that is exactly what it would do, because that is exactly what it is doing, right? Of course, we're going to, I'm recording this the day before, so we're going to see everything that goes down, on Tuesday for this indictment. But, of course, fingers crossed, hoping for the best. You really don't want to see this type of thing happen to your country. But ultimately, this is the reality that we are facing right now. And as I'm showing you guys, even GPT, the left-wing, biased AI program, is even saying that, yeah, the Democrats have pretty much lost their fucking minds, and they're about to completely destroy this country in the most literalist of sense. I don't know if I fucking said that right, but either way, you get the idea, all right? So, 4, implications for further elections. So, targeting of a political opponent in this manner could have implications for future elections, including the potential for the use of similar tactics by other candidates or parties in future campaigns, right? So, essentially, this is a completely unprecedented moment, right? So, what this is doing, this is setting a precedent, right? Essentially, this is going to be the case that is going to, all other cases against presidential actions, things like that, campaign finance, whatever the fuck it is all about, that's what this is going to be held up against, right? This is going to be the new norm now. And that's basically what they're saying, is that this is going to set a precedent, and essentially it's open season on all past presidents. Essentially this is going to make it to where that the federal government can now be weaponized in either direction, right? The Republicans can do it just as much as the Democrats could do it now once they set this precedent, right? And that is a horrible, scenario to imagine there, right? So one thing that I always, kind of point out, especially on like Twitter and stuff like that, is, all these lefties that are talking about, oh, we need to get rid of the First Amendment, we should not have free speech in this country, right? Okay, well, you are aware of the fact that if you guys get rid of free speech, you're not going to remain in power forever, right? You do realize that as soon as you get rid of free speech and a Republican comes into office, first thing that they're going to do, decency laws, right? Say goodbye to pride parades forever. You ain't having none of that shit in the streets. No, there is no free speech, decency laws, right? So that's essentially what they don't seem to get. And that's why, people say like the Republicans love socialism just as much as the Democrats do. And that's essentially true with the, establishment rhino Republicans and stuff like that, as opposed to the new up and coming MAGA, Republicans, which is essentially extremely, limited government. It's essentially, the antithesis. It's essentially trying to, I guess, delegitimize a lot of these, overreaching and essentially socialist bureaucratic institutions in the government, right? And so essentially the government has worked very hard to legitimize themselves and to engineer the consent of the people to allow them to do things like this, like the Obamacares and basically all this socialized everything, right? And so they worked really hard for decades to get to this point. They don't want these MAGA Republicans to come in and go ahead and essentially undermine everything that they've worked so hard to control in regards to every aspect of our lives, right? So essentially that is the entire reason for this whole witch hunt. And as you can see, ChatGPT is essentially pointing out the implications of what this I guess self-preservation mode within the Democratic Party is going to bring about, right? So let's check out this last one. So 5, international reputation. The perception that the United States is using its government power to target political opponents could harm its reputation as a champion of democracy and human rights on the global stage, right? So essentially, this is making us look really fucking bad right now. I mean, we are, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to, the idea of democracy and all this and that shit, and basically the idea of the liberal world order, right? We are essentially at the head. We are at the helm, right? We are the leaders of the free world, essentially, right? And we are proving that freedom really means nothing anymore. The idea of democracy, the idea of people being able to choose the candidates that they wish to be leading our country, that is being completely undermined right now. And that's the world is watching. The world is watching, and it is making us look really bad on the world stage, right? So, in short, the scenario you describe would be a significant threat to the functioning of democratic institutions and could have far-reaching consequences for the United States and its political system. Right? Pretty intense shit. So let's just go ahead and add some more hypotheticals in there, right? What would hypothetically happen if that same scenario were also coupled with a global collapse in trust of the U.S. dollar? It's not, again, purely hypothetical. It's not like that's, it's not like anything like that's going on right now, right? It's not like we're, essentially, printing unlimited amounts of money to bail out banks and all these, large financial institutions, right? That's definitely not what's happening. And, obviously the world's, definitely not watching us, because it's not like, the entire world pins its currency based off of the value of the United States dollar, and they're just watching us completely undermine the value behind it by essentially taking out the risk factor, right? So if a global collapse in trust of the US dollar were to occur at the same time as the hypothetical scenario you described, the consequences for the United States and the global economy could be severe. Great reset style, right? 1, the economic stability. The collapse in trust of the U.S. dollar could trigger a global economic crisis with significant impacts on trade, investment, and financial markets. Right. So as I mentioned already, basically every other nation backs its currency based off of its value in comparison to the United States dollar. Right. That is essentially why we are able to control the global finance. Right. That's essentially why we've been at the top of the food chain for so long. I mean, we don't really need to produce anything. Right. We produce the currency. That's it. It doesn't matter, who makes the laws, who does this and that, who does the trade, none of that shit. It's who controls the finance, it's who controls the central banking systems, right? It's who controls the finances. It's who can print the money. And that is the United States, right? So essentially that is being completely eroded away because we're completely irresponsible with it. And we have been for decades. And it's completely undermined the global currency in order to basically, we're using it to buy votes and shit. We're using it for fucking socialized healthcare and shit like that. It's, of course, it is going on as debt. That's our debt. It's not government debt. The government doesn't have any money. The government uses our money through tax dollars, right? So that whatever the government debt is, that reflects on the United States people as a whole, right? And so essentially, you can only go so far until the entire system collapses, and that's essentially the point that we're getting to now, right? So, point 2. Weakened global influence. The U.S. dollar is currently the world's reserve currency, and a collapse in trust could undermine the country's economic and political influence on the global stage. Again, like I said, the entire world kind of pins their currency based off of the value to the United States dollar. If this completely collapsed coupled with the fact that our political system in general, basically the idea of freedom and democracy and a constitutional republic, and basically the idea of a liberal world order, which is essentially, like I said, the world order that we have is essentially collapsing, right? And it's really, like I said, it's weakening our global influence. I mean, granted, I don't think that we should have any type of global hegemony over how other sovereign nations run their country, or what how trade is run, any of that type stuff. I don't believe that. Granted, yes, it has provided us with a certain sort of comfort of life, a certain sort of a standard of living and stuff like that, but essentially that standard of living, that coddling of society, basically that social safety net that we have turned into a hammock, that is essentially the problem. So a little bit hard times, I mean, you have to fucking work, you have to be a goddamn man, you maybe have to go out and chop some fucking wood, maybe you got to go out and grow some food, start a garden, something like that, start a community, something, whatever, I don't know. that could be something good for us. You know, we've become too coddled, too, you know, impersonal with each other because, you know, the idea of you know, charity, the idea of basically the community looking out for each other based off of a community, you know, bond, basically a community you know, sense of duty, that is completely gone, right? And the reason for that is because everything, you know, if you see somebody on the streets or something like that, or you see, you know, a mother that's, you know, struggling with their kids to pay food because there's not a dad, you know, around, first thing you think is, bitch, go get food stamps. You know, get your ass on some fucking welfare. What the hell you doing, dude? Out here begging for change. That's not the way that it should be, and that's not the way that it used to be. The way that it used to be is, you know, communities would come together to help families in need. The way that, you know, it used to work is it wasn't based off of pity. It wasn't based off of who's the biggest victim. It was based off of, you know, who needs it more, right? Rather than being based off of pity, it was based off of compassion, and that was the way that we thrived for so long. That's why just within, you know, the few, you know, several decades since this whole, you know, great deal and all this, you know, great society type bullshit has gone on, that has basically, you know, been the slow march. The, you know, McCarthy was absolutely correct. You know, the slow march toward you know, socialist communism here in America. Yeah, I totally forgot where I was going, but you get the fucking idea, right? So 3. Domestic political instability. The scenario described could further exacerbate political polarization and deepen divisions within the United States, potentially leading to social unrest, protests, and other forms of political instability. So this is what we're kind of worried about for, you know, for Tuesday, for today, right? So once this goes down, you know, once Trump is actually indicted, of course, like I said, that's why they're going to try and keep the cameras away from it. They're not going to want to, you know, publicize his mugshot. There's already left-wing rags talking about, you know, don't publicize his mugshot because essentially that's going to gain him more power among the populace, right? So, and they're absolutely correct, right? So this is going to be basically a rallying, you know, this is going to be the picture that is the picture of the 2024 election, right? On the right, we're going to be using it as, you know, basically Trump is our martyr, right? And then on the left, they're going to be using that same mugshot photo as basically, he's a criminal, get him out of there, he's the next Hitler, right? And you know, so essentially, you know, that's really, really going to, you know, deepen polarized divisions here in the United States, and that's going to lead to some pretty I don't know, to be honest. You know, I could just be completely hyping it up for nothing, but either way, this is a very, 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 very majorly historic moment in human history. Right? This is going to go down as one of the defining moments in human history. This is literally the turning of an era. This is a new dawn. This is, you know, a completely new world that we're living in. You know, ever since the post-COVID, you know, stuff like that, we already knew that post-COVID was going to be, you know, a completely new world, but we did not know that it was going to be this politically different. We did not know that we knew that it was going to be, you know, it's somewhat socially different. You know, people aren't going to be getting along, or people aren't going to be as personal as they used to be with each other. You know, as we're seeing a lot with these younger people, they still wear these masks, and it's not because they're afraid of COVID or anything like that. It's because they become comfortable in the masks, right? It's because they literally feel safe. They feel secure, right? It's I don't know, I guess a self-conscious type thing, right? But yeah, you know, that's what's going on, right? So 4. Geopolitical tensions. A collapse in trust of the U.S. dollar could increase geopolitical tensions and exacerbate international rivalries, potentially leading to conflict and instability. All right, so that's what we're seeing going on right now with the BRICS nations, with Russia and China. You know, essentially, we're seeing the rise of civilization states. We're basically seeing the collapse of the you know, kind of globalist, you know, United States, NATO, United Nations, basically global overreach, and basically all these people, you know, just trying to force all of these other countries to, you know, don't worry, we're going to go ahead and we're going to rescue you from the regime that you guys democratically elected yourselves, or egalitarianly, or, you know, chiefdom, or whatever the fuck you guys have going on here, and we're going to show you how to do politics right, because you guys don't know how to live. That's essentially what the Western, you know, liberal world order has basically done throughout the world. And that's we, you know, of course, to us it seems like we're doing the right thing, we're bringing democracy to all these nations. Like, no, what we're doing is we're interfering in these nations' sovereignty, right? These people, they don't fucking know a shit. If they're having a civil war, let them fucking fight it out. All right, if they're having land disputes with, you know, their neighbor and shit, why are we getting involved in that, right? Why are we taking a side in either direction, right? I understand the idea of um, military allies, stuff like that, right? But I mean, you know, at the same time, clearly this has resulted in a massive overreach. There's a reason that in the entire what is it, like 3,000 some odd years of recorded actual documented human history. There's been like 200 and some years of global peace. There's been about 200 and some years in several thousand years of human history that there's not been some sort of war being fought in the world, right? War is a essentially fucking war is the norm, right? So geopolitical tensions have always been a thing, and basically the United States and these NATO nations and basically the Western liberal world order has basically exacerbated things so far to the point where we are on the brink of World War III and essentially the turning of a brand new world order, right? So whether it's going to be a more civilization state, more nationalist populist movement and stuff like that remains to be seen. But that is essentially what it's looking like, all throughout the world, right? We're seeing, right wing, conservative parties are the nationalist parties are basically starting to take over and starting to gain some major political wins throughout the world, right? And essentially, we're seeing the collapse of the globalist Western liberal ideology, right? So, 5, potential for global contagion. The collapse of trust in the US dollar could have far reaching consequences for the global economy, potentially triggering a wider economic downturn and financial crisis, right? So essentially what they're saying is it's going to get bad before it gets, or it's going to get worse before it gets better, right? It's going to fall like a domino effect. It's going to, come down like one after the other, just chain reaction of economic collapse all over the world, right? And essentially it's not going to be the end of the world. We're not going to go back to the Stone Ages. We're not going to go back to the Dark Ages, but it is going to be it's going to be a completely new world, right? And again, this is all pure hypothetical. This is all conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat, like what if type shit. But like I said, Chat GPT is being pretty specific here when they point this out. They keep saying these scenarios that you're describing are horrific and nightmare scenarios and shit. But they're essentially pointing out what the potential implications of the Trump indictment, along with the global collapse of the U.S. dollar, the hyperinflation of the U.S. dollar, and basically just reckless government spending, right? So, in short, the combination of the hypothetical scenario you describe and a collapse in trust of the U.S. dollar would be a significant threat to the stability of the United States and the global economy, right? So let's go ask a little bit more hypothetical questions. So hypothetically, combine those scenarios with the military alliance of China and Russia and the economic alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, otherwise known as the BRICS nations. So if the scenario you describe were to occur simultaneously, the consequences would be severe and far-reaching both for the United States and the global community, right? Like I said, new world order altogether, right? So 1, geopolitical tensions. The military alliance of China and Russia and the economic alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, or BRICS, could increase geopolitical tensions and exacerbate international rivalries, potentially leading to conflict and instability. It's clearly leading to conflict and instability, seeing as we're in a quasi war with Russia right now, and we're about to be in another one with China at the same time. Meanwhile, China and Russia are teaming up military. Like, I don't know about militaristically completely yet, but they are allies, right? They they've been having meetings. They've been discussing the rise of this new world order, which essentially it's meant to be. It's coming, right? So essentially, when it comes to the United States, our government seems to have reached the point of maturation, right? So it started, it's the whole, nothing gold could stay, right? Life's greatest green is dawn, so and so, only for so long, blah blah blah, whatever. You get the point. But essentially, things are golden when they first arise, right? Just like a phoenix rising from the ashes. America rising up from the revolution, rising up from essentially, coming to this new world and kicking off the shackles of our, overseas overlords, basically, right? And essentially, during the beginning, in the first, 100 so years, whatever, first several hundred years, it was great. And essentially we're coming to the point of maturation, which we see occur throughout most human civilizations throughout history. And essentially it comes to a point where, like I said, things start out great. They get they remain great for so long that, but they get to a point where things like demagoguery ends up taking over, where essentially the government gets from the point of the essential functions, which is basically things like mediation of individual on individual um, conflicts, things like lawsuits, things like the rule of law, all that type stuff, making decisions politically, and globally and stuff like that. And essentially just keeping a common direction for the people, right? Whether that that used to be through things like monarchs, it used to be through things like the church, whatever. Essentially in the United States, it should be through the Constitution. That is essentially our guiding force. That was our guiding force. Essentially, as long as it doesn't infringe on our Constitution, well, that's that then, right? But essentially, we're seeing that that's become undermined as well too. So essentially, like I said, we're reaching the point of the United States maturation, where basically our government has like I said, degraded to the point of demagoguery, where basically we just, rather than focusing on political issues, we essentially focus on buying votes. It's become a popularity contest. We don't actually focus on the safety of the country. We don't actually focus on what's best for the country. We don't actually focus on what's best for our economy, for the people, nothing like that. We just focus on it's popularity contests, and it's essentially just political bullshit. It's all just completely engineered social, political bullshit, right? And that's basically the point that we've come to here in America, right? So, 2, erosion of U.S. global influence. The combination of a collapse in trust of the U.S. dollar and increased geopolitical tensions could further undermine the country's economic and political influence on the global stage. I mean, that pretty much goes without saying. That's pretty much what the majority of these hypothetical scenarios are basically all saying. It's essentially the United States is fucked, right? So of course they're not actually going to tell you that on the news. The White House is never going to come out and say, we're fucked, we're collapsing, things are worse than they seem. They're never going to tell you that, right? You're just going to wait till it happens, until people are shooting each other for a fucking loaf of bread, until people are shooting each other over bags of rice. That's when you're going to know. That's not a minute before then. I mean, you can kind of speculate, kind of like we're doing right now. But yeah, essentially the government is never going to tell you right before it's about to collapse, or right before the shit hits the fan. They're going to pretend like everything is on the up and up, right? Just look at Karine Jean-Pierre anytime she talks about the economy, or look at that Joe Biden anytime he talks about the economy. Look at really any politician anytime they talk about this state of our nation right now. It's really a lot worse than they're letting on, people. So 3, a shift in global power. The rise of the BRICS economies and the military alliance of China and Russia could lead to a shift in global power away from the United States and towards these countries. Right? So like I said, that's essentially what is happening. Right? So it's basically the collapsing of the Western liberal globalist order, and it is the rise of civilization states, right? So whether or not Russia and China end up trying to share essentially a global hegemony over the rest of the world remains to be seen. But essentially, I don't think that these two nations are the types of nations that would like to share anything, let alone a power shit, let alone a border. They don't even like each other. They're essentially coming together to overthrow the Western globalist order, right? And basically bring about the rise of civilization states, right? So what civilization states are is basically where civilizations, started, right? So it'd be, places like the United States, we would be our own civilization state. Places like the Western Europe, they would be their own civilization state, right? Places like, Africa, places like, Australia, the different parts of Asia, the northern part of Asia, where Russia's at, that'd be its own civilization state. Basically where these large overlapping, civilizations essentially came to be, right? It's a kind of like a shit. What's the fucking word I'm looking for? Um, I don't fucking know. But basically, where everyone's the same fucking race and shit. You know the fucking word I'm talking about, right? But essentially, that's what civilization states are, right? It's essentially kind of like nationalist populace based off of common interests, common goals, and often common nationalities, race, things like that, right? It's essentially a nationalist populist, you know, global movement, right? And a lot of this, with like I said, with the collapse of all this stuff, because like I said, they said it's going to be going like dominoes. It's going to basically solidify these smaller communities, right? Rather than the whole big global, why can't we all just come together and give peace a chance and stuff like that type thing? It's essentially going to break us down into smaller, more tight knit, populist, nationalist type nations, right? Again, this is all hypothetical, still remains to be seen, but this is a lot of the stuff that I've, been reading into, and it's a lot of the stuff that it's looking like it's going to go, especially, based off of other books that I've read based, off of the origins of civilization, the anthropological, breakdown of how, the state rose to be, from early chiefdoms and egalitarian tribes to essentially where we're at now, right? But this seems to be the way that it's going, right? So, 4, potential for global economic downturn. The collapse in trust of the US dollar combined with geopolitical tensions and the potential for economic instability in BRICS countries could trigger a wider economic downturn and financial crisis. So, again, like I said, the whole toppling of the dominoes, that's what it's saying again. So, risk of military conflict. The combination of military and economic alliances, geopolitical tensions, and shifting global power dynamics could increase the risk of military conflict and destabilize the international order. In short, World War III, right? That's essentially what this is. And I know, I've had a different World War III conspiracy theory, videos before. Most of them actually do kind of go down this line. Just a lot of them have different kind of triggers, things like that. But essentially, these types of scenarios are essentially doomsday scenarios, and a lot of them, if any single one of them occurs, it's doomsday. The total combination of all of them occurring at the same moment, it's needless to say, it's not good, right? So, in short, the combination of these hypothetical scenarios could have severe and far-reaching consequences for the United States and global community, including geopolitical tensions, economic instability, and potential military conflict. Alrighty, so that's a lot to take in there, right? So, ChatGPT seems to think that the Democrats, going on this political witch hunt for Donald Trump is, essentially what could be the, triggering spark to this powder keg of a political fiasco that is the current state of affairs in the world right now, right? So we have things like COVID that really, really kind of crippled the global economy and our own, personal sanity, not to mention, right? But a lot of this, there's speculation, there's conspiracy theories as to whether it was engineered, as to whether it was done on purpose in order to trigger a certain type of event like this. But at the same time, you also have to consider that the United States has been working on essentially undermining and inflating the United States dollar to the point where it's about like 98% devalued as to its original gold pinned price. And yeah, it's been a long time coming, right? So essentially, once we got off the gold standard, and essentially once after the end of World War II, once pretty much after World War One, once we started doing these taxes and all this shit to get fucking this short term fucking income tax to go ahead and fight the war effort and shit, right? Essentially, we've never not been out of war since then, right? They saw all this money coming in, and they saw basically the people rallying behind a certain cause, right? And they found out that essentially, if you keep saying, trying to say that there's a big scary monster out there that we need to protect you from, give us your money. The only thing that could ever stop this is, us, so give us all your money and we'll take care of you. That's been the cause of a lot of this, collapse. It's been essentially what has been leading us to the point where we're at now, right? So essentially, it could be, you could pinpoint it to a certain, specific, spark that's going to ignite the powder keg. But essentially, either way, this has been a long time coming, right? It's essentially been written in the stars. It's kind of, that's the way that things work. You know, nothing gold could stay, right? Things change, things evolve, things adapt, and basically they always tend to go in the better direction, right? So essentially, we're not going to devolve into some sort of authoritarian, you know, global dictatorship, nothing like that, right? It's not going to be, you know, like Red Dawn. You know, the Russians aren't going to come kicking in our doors. I mean, it's essentially the United States. We still, at this point, have very, very little to fear from foreign invasion, right? The United States citizens still have a very strong will to maintain our country, if you haven't noticed. And at the same time, we also have more guns than we have people, and even more ammunition still. And that's just in public hands. That's not even including what our military has, right? So essentially, the United States being invaded, anything like that, it's not likely, highly unlikely, right? But as per our status as being essentially the world leader, that is very much in question at this. And you know, of course, you know, you always want to root for your nation, but at the same time, we have to understand we brought this amongst ourselves, right? Of course, you know, probably not us, as you know, essentially our fucking grandparents and so on and so forth and past generations and shit. But essentially, like I said, this has been a long time coming. And again, we are not going to be conquered. It's not going to be some kind of bullshit like that. You know, we're not all going to be fucking speaking Russian here in America. It's, you know, not going to be anything like that, right? It's simply going to be the collapse of our Western liberal world order and the rise of a new world order, whether that is some sort of globalist fucking, you know, World Economic Forum type world order, because essentially, you know, those are the people that control the money and, you know, the businesses, means of production, all that type shit, or whether it is a more, you know, BRICS type, you know, essentially, you know, civilization type states, and basically more, you know, nationalist populist movements, rather than, you know, essentially where basically nations take care of themselves and, you know, basically everyone's just sovereign. Nobody gets involved in foreign entanglements that do not directly involve them, things like that. And essentially, you know, trade with all, entanglements with none type thing on a global scale. Or, you know, like I said, or the World Economic Forum remains to be seen. We'll see, you know, what ends up happening. But either way, we're going to be all right. Humanity is going to continue on, but shit's going to get real. So essentially, you know, I don't know, start stocking up on fucking shit, you know, start stocking up on water. I mean, you should be anyway. You should always make sure that you have some sort of emergency supplies. Make sure that you're stocked up on ammunition. Make sure that, you know, you're ready for just about anything. Ultimately, make sure that you guys are taking care of yourselves, right? And again, you know, like I said, I don't want you to get blackpilled. The United States, we're still going to be a superpower. We're just probably not going to be the superpower that we have been for the time that we have been, right? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys, you know, stopping by, checking out this long video. You know, sorry for the length and everything, but you know, like I said, I was having some fun with Chat GPT, and you know, yeah, apparently they think that the Democrats are out of their fucking mind too. All right, so don't forget to like this video, share this video out. You know, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. But I appreciate all you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Fuck off.